Sangha Jodan Soki Shonam La Janjo Barda Dane Kyabsuchi Dagi Junzo Jiba Sonam Gi Drola Pencher Sangha Drubar Sho Sangha Jodan Soki Shonam La Janjo Bardu Dane Kyabsuchi Dagi Junzo Jiba Sonam Gi Drola Pencher Sangha Drubar Sho Sangha Jodan Soki Shonam La Janjo Bardu Dane Kyabsuchi Dagi Junzo Jiba Sonam Gi Drola Pencher Sangha Drubar Sanjan Damja De Watan De Weng Yutan Dempar Gurchi Samchan Damchen Dungal Tan Dungal Gi Yutan Trawar Gurchi Sanjan Tamchen Dungal Mewa De Watam Mi Trawar Gurchi Sanjan Tamchen Yirin Shadan Yila Nepe Tonyo La Nepar Gurchi Sobo Wa Shodo Safa Dhamma Sobo Wa Shodo Ham. We probably should have start time in the morning on Sunday at 11. So of the five pronged approach, the mudra in Mahamudra in 5 prongs, Guru Yoga, bodhicitta, the view, which refers to Mahamudra meditation or formless meditation, emptiness meditation, deity yoga, and dedication. Although in commentaries the chapter on dedication isn't very big, it's always considered very important because everything we do in our life, our motivation, and the dedication at the end, motivation in the beginning and during, and then dedication at the end, is what makes it into a spirit, transforms it from merely going through a number of postures or activities into a spiritual activity. In the Mahamudra tradition, many of the great masters who achieved enlightenment were not monks or nuns, but rather ordinary people leading ordinary lives. The greatest of the early teachers, Gayadhari, who was the guru of the Mahasiddha Seraha, is considered to be the great formulator. In other words, she put together many of Buddha's instructions and sort of organized them as they have come down through the ages. And her great disciple, so she was an arrow maker, and her great disciple Seraha achieved enlightenment under her as an arrow maker. The arrow was considered a symbol of enlightenment. If the shaft is straight, the arrow flies true, representing the shamatha or samadhi side. And if the point is sharp, then when it hits its target, it performs the desired function. Like vipassana, with samadhi turning vipassana in a very particular way, penetrates to the meaning of emptiness. In ancient days, of course, arrows were used for hunting and gathering, and also were used in military matters. If one's bow and arrows are good, one will lead a life of safety and security, a safe, secure life. There will always be food on the table. Enemies will not be able to attack. There will be many benefits will come. If one's arrows are not well fashioned, then the hunting gathering falls apart. One's kingdom is overrun by enemies, and one's wife and children are sold into slavery in foreign lands. I think in Buddhism, when we translate ahimsa as nonviolence, that's not the meaning in Buddhism as nonviolence. The meaning in Buddhism is to always have love and compassion, and to do your best not to harm anyone. But as a living being, we have to protect our own body vessel. In other words, if someone robs and kills us and then sells the wife and children into slavery, it's not such a good thing. Therefore, in the very beginning of the Mahamudra tradition, this arrow and the arrowsmith were used as symbols of Mahamudra, as opposed to, say, meditating monks and nuns, which was often the case outside of the Mahamudra tradition. Mahamudra came to represent how one achieves enlightenment in one's life, regardless of one's profession or occupation. So many of the great lineage masters were ordinary career people, not monks or nuns. But lots of them were smiths, like arrowsmiths, goldsmiths, tailors, and so forth. Others were traders. Others were military people. Others were kings and queens and princesses. There's a few courtesans thrown in the olden India. Being a courtesan was one of the very high prized female professions. Basically, the kingdom would bow, kings far and wide would bow at a lady's feet. So those examples are used to show how Mahamudra can be practiced in any profession. And by means of right motivation, then any livelihood becomes a right livelihood. Every livelihood becomes right livelihood in Buddha's original teaching of the Noble Eightfold Path, or the Eightfold Path as seen by, as perceived by the Aryas, the noble ones. Without that right motivation, whatever we do is just kind of a robotic performance of that activity. Path to enlightenment, usually we say two sides to it. The collection or the accumulation of good karma or good energy, and the accumulation of wisdom. In Tibet, one of the four sons of the late great Urgyen Tulku is called Sogni Rinpoche, the two collections Tulku. And he travels around the world, mostly teaching Dzogchen. But that's the meaning of his name, collector of good karma and collector of wisdom, the two accumulations. Often we say the collection of wisdom largely refers to emptiness and dependent arising, awareness of emptiness, or the non-existence of thing in the manner of their appearance, and dependent arising. and the collection of good karma or positive energy, sunam gisok, punya in Sanskrit, refers to all other spiritual activities or all other activities, actually, when done with the positive motivation. So this 5-point Mahamudra is designed as a path that fulfills those two, positive karma and wisdom. In many of Tibetan texts, Guru Yoga is taught as the first of all teachings, and we go from there, usually in Kagyu tradition, to the Lodak Namshi, the 4 ways of turning the mind, meditating on precious human body and impermanence and cause and effect and so forth. In the Sakya, they do the Zambashitrel, the 4 ways of parting from the 4 attachments, from the 4 clingings, as are known. And Gelugpa and some Kagyu schools, the Kebusumgilam, the path of the practices to generate the 3 levels of spiritual perspective. So all the Mahamudra commentaries mention that this is very beneficial to do that. And Tashi Namgyal's commentary mentions that it's good beforehand, in conjunction with the practice, to do lots of prostrations. Tibetans are very enthusiastic prostrators. Whenever you go on Tibetan pilgrimage, you'll see Tibetans doing prostrations everywhere. And many will do 100,000 at the beginning of a tantric practice or earlier in their life. I've a few times here, I've mentioned the story of when I was in Dharamsala. Across the street from me was a little old bedridden lady getting ready to die. And I was friends with her daughter and her daughter's son. She was about my age. Her husband had died had joined the Indian Army, I think, and had died somehow. And the grandma had slipped on the winter and broken a hip, so was bedridden and was basically had been in bed for a couple of years and couldn't move, and was just getting ready to die. So when I went over to Canada one year, I brought her back a wheelchair. And I thought it might be nice for her for the last few weeks or months of her life to get wheeled to the Dalai Lama's temple and spend some time there. And I brought it back, and I offered to give it to her because in India a good wheelchair is almost impossible to find in those days. It was the only wheelchair in the Himalayas. It was like driving a Hummer in Wheaton. And I extracted a promise from her neighbors, because she lived on a hill like this. So basically couldn't go anywhere, that they would 2 or 3 times a week carry her down and put her in the wheelchair and wheel her to the temple a half mile away and leave her there all day. And come back and take her home in the evening, and only on that basis would I give up the wheelchair. Actually, I grew very attached to it, because India, everyone squats on their heels. There's no good, comfortable chairs in the whole country outside of the cities. And I took it back thinking I'd give it to her, and then I sat in it for the first couple of days when I was back. And those things are comfortable. And I really was such took a great personal effort to part from it. So I extracted 3 or 4 very hard promises. Now you have to promise or you're not getting it. You have to promise or you're not getting it. And then anyway, she got it and I left. And that was like in the, I guess probably the mid to late 80s after my training. When I left in 84, I trained from 72 to 84. Then I'd go back every year for a few months for Dalai Lama's teaching or to do retreats or whatever. And about 15 or 20 years went by. And I was in Florida, and this Tibetan guy came to my lecture, and he came up and said, "Oh, you're Glenn. You're Mr. Glenn. I used to see you when I was like 5 or 6 years old." He was in his mid-20s. He said, "I used to live next door to grandmother Migmar. And when you gave her that wheelchair and you used to visit the family and bring her little snacks and little gifts to cheer her up and stuff." And I said, "Oh yeah, yes. I think I remember seeing you 20 years ago when you were 5 years old, living in one of the 10 houses near her." I think. And I said, "When did Grandma Migmar die?" And she said, "Oh no, she didn't die." When they left her there at the temple, they'd take her out of the chair and seat her on the ground on a cushion. And then after a few months of doing that, she decided to like get up on her knees and do like a half prostration, like just back up to her knees. And then when her muscles started working again. And so then she started like standing up and doing like bowing half prostrations. And within a year, she was doing full prostrations. And she gave the wheelchair away. That was something I hadn't planned on, her giving that wheelchair away. That was not part of the deal. So I was very irritated with that story. That was a very sad ending to my wheelchairs. Now it was in the hands of good knows whom. Goodness knows who now owned that wheelchair. But Tibetans love those prostrations. I did my 100,000 when I was, in my mid-20s, because I arrived in Dharamsala at 23, and people would do them, and just kind of to get to know Tibetans and to practice some Tibetan in a kind of a chit-chatty way. You know, if you rub elbows with shoulders with Tibetans doing prostrations, it's kind of like a nice way to meet people. You meet a better class of people. But I'm not a big fan of them anymore. Once I hit 50, I thought, I think I'll call that enough prostrations for this lifetime. But both the Tashi Namgyal and also the Panchen Lama's commentary and several second Lama's commentary, they all mention that prostrations are a good physical thing to do while getting ready for tantric training. And different lineages of Tantra have different traditions. Some just do some prostrations and some Vajrasattva's. The Niguma, you do some prostrations. You don't do the Vajrasattva mantra. You do the yoga of the Am. And the Panchen Lama recommends the chanting the sutra in 3 sections of the so-called 3 heaps sutra. But a heap sounds kind of funny to me. It's like a very unprecise baking term. Put a heap of salt, or add a heap of milk. And I do find that a very beautiful little practice for people who can find it. There's several translations on the internet you can find. I actually memorized it when I was in my mid-20s. I don't remember it anymore because those things, if you don't recite them like once a day or 3-4 times a week, then they can slip away. But I think it's very, very beautiful practice to do. The names of the 35 Buddhas. Sometimes it's erroneously called the Confession Sutra in 3 heaps. But Shakpa, as I mentioned when I taught Mahamudra in Chicago before, because it's mentioned in the root text, Shakpa literally means exposing the inside, looking inside, something like that. Like the word for splitting wood is the same word. You shuck the wood. And Panchen Lama mentions just those 3 prostrations, Vajrasattva, and the 3 parts sutra. And I think Tashi Namgyal just mentions the prostrations, Vajrasattva, and then the Lodok Namshi, the 4 ways of turning the mind. And then the Kebusum, the general Lamrim teaching. And all of the commentaries point out that there's 2 ways with the Mahamudra, and one is the way based on shamatha vipassana, which is common to both sutra and tantra. And there's the way of practicing Mahamudra based on the having generated the subtle consciousness by balancing the drops and opening the central channel. So this way comes in the 4th verse of when we put the 5 into a verse for each of the 5 parts of Mahamudra. The 4th verse is, may I accomplish the trainings of the tantric yogas, of the tantric applications of the deity yoga. And on that base, arouse the Mahamudra mind. And that means two things: the generation stage and the completion stage. And we printed out this little Chakra Samvara Sadhana that Stephanie graciously prepared and Paula very kindly printed out for us yesterday. Sometimes one does just the sadhana, and sometimes one inserts the completion stage practice with Mahamudra into the sadhana. Can be done either way. There's various lineages of Chakra Samvara in Tibet, the 3 great ones being coming from Mahasiddha Krishna Charan, the black yogi, as he's known. And basically because he was a black guy, not because he practiced shamanic arts or anything like that. India in ancient times, the original settlers of India, many people think the Dravidians were African in origin. And so some Indians, like Krishna, is always shown as kind of a blue-black guy, meaning he was more of Dravidian origin. Then the Aryans invaded about 4000 BC or so, and people not quite sure where they came from, but many people think southern Russia, Uzbekistan, northern Persia. And they were sort of more whiter people. And so those were the two kind of main groups in India from about 4000 BC until later, coming down from the northern part of Tibet, you had the golden people, the Tibetans and Mongolians. Once the Mongols spread over the Silk Road and started coming down into India. And that's really from the time of King Ashoka. That's from about 300 BC, something like that. Yeah, so with doing the generation and completion stage yogas and Mahamudras, on the generation stage level, usually one does the sadhana with the three intertwined. And often to get one's Mahamudra mind kick-started, often one will do a month or a 2-month retreat or 3-month retreat. Traditionally, when people had more time and longer holidays, you planted in spring and harvested in autumn, and then you had a lot of extra time in the winter. So it gave time for those kind of longer retreats without much difficulty. Then you'd do your sadhanas morning and evening, and your Mahamudra would be the main practice, because the first part of Mahamudra being shamatha, or to get strong, unmoving mind. You can't do many things at that phase of it, basically. So I thought first we'll look through it a little bit from how it's done with the sadhana, and then we'll look through it from how the completion stage is mixed in with the sadhana. And generally, if people do, there's various ways people can do training, do their own practice, and it's always good to have one's own practice, one's own person, have one's own self in charge of how things are going and how to manage or micromanage whatever is there. Tibetans like to try and do what they call a nyitun, a one-day practice, once or twice a month. And if people can do that, it's very wonderful. You basically take a day, like a Saturday or a Sunday, or a day off from work, or a day when you're not working, and dedicate that day to doing 4 sessions. And otherwise, just morning and evening to do some little practice as much as is convenient for you. And I think the reason why we printed this out yesterday is because last year I did a Milarepa retreat here, and we said I would send Stephanie a sadhana and she would send it to everyone. And then once a month she would say, "Hey Glenn, where's that sadhana? People keep asking me." And then a month would go by and, "Hey Glenn, where's that sadhana?" But somehow I think the world was not yet ready for that sadhana. So this time, Stephanie thought, I think we'll print it out beforehand. In Buddhism we say women are wisdom. So again, before we start the practice, it's usual to do the breathing meditation. The 21 breaths with mind on the breath and breathing in and out. And Tashi Namgyal suggests also doing the 9-round breathe in and breathe out, breathe in and breathe out. 3 ways, like with the white light coming in the right nostril and out the left, and then red in the left nostril and out the right. to totally clear the lungs, as is done in the 6 yogas of both Naropa and Niguma, and in many of the tantric practices do that. And then to do some vase breathing for a few moments, and that sort of balances the energies and creates a good physical base for doing the. One can also do some prostrations and some Vajrasattva mantras, or recite the 3 parts sutra once or 3 times. Because Tibetans memorize all those things, reciting them is very easy. It's like, so you go at that rate, and like a 5 or 6 page text takes about maybe 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes. But when we put it in English, and the way we chant in English makes it like 3 or 4 times as long, and not as much fun, because often like the English poetry isn't as beautiful and smooth. And then one generates motivation with either refuge and bodhicitta, and can do some of the Mahamudra practice as a preliminary to the sadhana. Then one starts the sadhana, usually a request to the lineage gurus. So the lineage here goes to the Pamtingpa brothers, who were actually big in the Sakya lineage. And when Gampopa came to Milarepa, Milarepa sent him to Sarilotsawa, one of the great early Sakya translators, to receive his chakra samvara empowerment. Therefore, even in Khargyu, sometimes sees the Pamtingpas, although their lineage comes to Khargyu through Gampopa, going in that way to receive it from, to receive the Pamtingpa brothers. So, Pamtingpa brothers seem to have been Nepali, and they also studied with Naropa, just as did Marpa, and then they went to Nepal and did all their practice in Nepal up in Parping. So those of you who visit to Nepal, if you visited Parping, also up there is Guru Rinpoche's Enlightenment Cave. But it's very famous for Guru Rinpoche's Enlightenment Cave, but it's also very famous for the Pamtingpa brother Vajrayogini temple up there. And when Tibetans came into exile, there were really only the little, very old Nepali Vajrayogini temple, which is very, very small, run by a Newar Buddhist priest and his wife and kids. And then one by one, Tibetan monasteries started popping up in retreat centers, and now there must be 30 or 40 Tibetan centers out there for study and retreat and so on. And anyway, that's part of them being, because that's where this lineage comes from the Parping Valley, from the Pamtingpa brothers who studied with Naropa. And the various sadhanas have different lengths for the guru transmission, and one puts them above one's head and chants the names. Hundreds of names. Here we just put a few. So always Haruka Vajrayogini, Gantapada, also just called Gantapa. And so often in Tibetan paintings, he's the one of the Mahasiddhas who's seen floating in the sky in union with his consort. Those of you who have seen my book on the flying mystics will be hip to such info. Guyapan, who is Tilopa, Naropa, and from Naropa, Pamtingpa. And to the great lineage masters of Tibet. So comes to Tibet then, and to the passes down the Milarepa and Gampopa, and lineages coming through there. And after that, it goes in many different directions. So all those different, depending on what lineage you receive, depends on where it went. So Kargyupas split into 12, or developed 12 different branches, you could say. It's not like they split off angrily. But of the 12 early great students of the first 2 generations after Gampopa, they were all from very different parts of Tibet. So their hermitages became their own school, although having the same name, Kargyu. Karma, Kargyu, Drikung, Kargyu, Pama, Trukpa, Kargyu, and Pama Trupa Kargyu, and the Drukpa Kargyu, and so on. Bhutan is called the land of the dragon because in the time of the 5th Dalai Lama, about 30 years before he was a big guy, when he was merely a living Buddha tulku, at that time the Karmapa and his supporters, the supporters of the Karmapa, tried to unite the 12 Kargyu schools under the Karmapa. So the Karma Kargyu king of Song thought that would be a good idea and took it upon himself to do it. And so that led to kind of a big resistance from those other 11 Kargyu schools, because nobody likes to be subsumed under someone else's umbrella unless your own umbrella isn't working well. And they figured they were doing quite okay. And so then the Karma Kargyu king, the Pema Karpo, head of the Drukpa Kargyu at the time, passed away, and there were various candidates, and one was favored by that king. And so the other one, the family got nervous that he may run into trouble with that king, who was a little bit of a roughneck. And so they, with the family, ran to Bhutan. And then he became he was Drukpa Kargyu, so therefore Drukpa Kargyu, he became the first Lama king of Bhutan. And his reincarnations were Lama kings in Bhutan from 1634 until the British masterminded a coup d'etat under the evil Baron Wangchuk in about 1908 or 09 or something like that. And then in 1910, Bhutan became part of the British Commonwealth, but as a kingdom, not as a territory or a colony. So anyway, those spread in various ways. So it went down into Bhutan with the Drukpas, and then with the Drikungs went up to the Drikung monastery, and then branched out to all their dozens of small hermitages. And then Shalu Monastery, Bhutan Rinchen Trub gathered all those and brought them to Shalu Monastery. And then it went around. So the Tibetan masters of Tibet went into something like, you could say, 30 or 40 different lineages. And in olden days, those were all very remote from one another with, horseback or walking and so forth. And so it comes down to us today in that way. I request you inspire me to go beyond polarities and dualities of mind through the common path to uphold the samya of empowerments, engage in the generation stage yogas as a preliminary to taking up the practice of the 5 completion stage yogas. So these 5 completion stage yogas are just a way of dividing the completion stage in the Chakrasambhara Tantra, but it's the same, all the completion stage and all highest yoga tantras have same essential elements. Tumo, or inner fire, Chandali, then illusory body, which is divided into during the day and during the night being dream yoga, and clear light yoga during the day and during the night being clear light at the moment of death as a preliminary to dream yoga. And then Yuga Nada, or the Great Union as it's known. So, in other words, one can do both together. This is suggesting, as a preliminary, that one does it as the basis of. Then they have a special refuge body chitta prayer here. To for inspiration, Buddha's Dharma Sangha Dakas of the secret mantra yoga, Dakas and Dakinis of secret mantra yoga. Heroines, that's a Pao in Tibetan. Like, what's Pao? All bodhisattvas, especially to my spiritual masters, to accomplish the welfare of all living beings, may I become Chakrasambhara, then place every living being in Chakrasambhara's supreme state. Instant generation, in an instant I arise as Chakrasambhara, male and female in union. Then one takes up the bell and the vajra. And as you know, the Vajrasattva painting or statue is always, the bell is like this in his hand. The Vajra is in his right hand like this. So you either hold up like this, or sometimes they go like this and swirl. If it's male tantra, you go like this. If it's female tantra, you go counterclockwise. The bell you put down in your lap, and then you can ring it. And you say the words associated with empowering the Vajra, empowering the bell. Vajra is method, bell is wisdom, both together the nature of conventional and ultimate bodhicitta, the aspiration to enlightenment. So conventional bodhicitta in Tantra is the great bliss and supreme and ultimate bodhicitta is the clear light mind. Hold this firmly. Now hold the Vajra at your heart between the thumb and the ring finger of your right hand and recite Om Sarvata Siddha Vajra Samaya Tikta Aktatundara Yami Vajra Sato Hi 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 So Ha. You say the He 5 times, that's the 5 Buddhas, meaning you invoke the 5 primordial wisdoms or the 5 Dakini wisdoms. Now hold the bell between the thumb and ring finger of your left hand, hold it to your left hip while saying Om Vajraganta Hum. I delight Vajrasattva, and the others hold up the bell while calling Hum. Brandishing the Vajra liberates all living beings from confusion. Joyfully I hold the Vajra and engage in the Dharma activity of liberation. Hum, 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 ho, ho, ho. It's a Tantra is really less a kind of a preliminary to Santa Claus. We know Santa Claus is really practicing Chakrasambhara because he always goes ha, 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 ho, ho, ho. That's probably why he's dressed in red, right? Celebrating the yogini color and the great passion. Then blessing the inner offering. The inner offering is often they just put a cup on their table. As you put the 5 meats and 5 liquids representing the 5 skandhas and the 5 liquids like the blood and the urine and the poo-poo and semen and ovum, those kind of things. And one does the ha-ho-ri, and if it's in male tantra, you go om-ahung 3 times, ha-ho-ri. Means you transform the 5 kleshas into the 5 wisdoms, the 5 skandhas, which are the 5 meats, the dog and the bull and the elephant and the horse and the human corpses. Represents transforming your 5 skandhas into 5 Buddhas. Your dead dog is a Buddha. And usually the vessel's only that big, but you manage to get the elephant and the dog and everyone in there. All faults of color, smell, and potential are washed away by the 5 wisdoms, and the inner offering becomes a great ocean of uncontaminated nectar of exalted wisdom. Then some tantras use a different mantra here. The Omkandarui Humpa, the action mantra, sort of basically emanates waves of light that purify everything and push away or eradicate all negativity. So if you're feeling a little bit in a bad mood over anything, you go Om Kandarui Humpa, and the dark clothes of your bad moodiness are instantly dispelled. Also things like ghosts. You know, if you got a bad relationship with Aunt Martha, dead old Aunt Martha, and she's hanging around trying to pester you. She's temporarily sedated and takes an afternoon nap. Everything becomes an Om Sabhavashoda Sabadama Sabhavashoda Hum, which is the primordial purity primordial purity of all phenomena. All things are by nature pure. Impurity is only caused by our own contextualization. Everything's pure for someone or something. It's only impure in terms of a particular context. Like a poison is a medicine to a doctor, it's a poison if a child drinks it. So then vast and expansive skull cups arise, and in the hungs come as the offering substances, nature's bliss and emptiness. From their form is the individual offering substances that operate as objects of pleasure within the six senses, arousing exalted, uncontaminated bliss. So the essence of tantric practice, as I mentioned the first day, Friday night, ordinary Buddhism, they often think of objects of the senses as being objects of attachment and desire and craving, and therefore problematic for the enlightenment path. But in Tantra, the objects of the senses are the celebration, the focus of celebration of the path to enlightenment. So here, the objects of the senses operate as objects of pleasure within the six senses, arousing exalted, uncontaminated bliss. In other words, the pleasure of things you hear, see, smell, taste, and touch are themselves sources of bliss, not sources of desire, not sources of attachment, but the very pleasure itself gives rise to the bliss consciousness, which does the Mahamudra meditation. Then the offering, Maragampanya, Vajra Pupe, Vajra Dupe, Vajra Devane, Vajra Ginde, Vajra Nevande, Vajra Shabde, Ahum. That's just the offering of the standard of the waters for washing karma and washing karma of body and karma of speech, karma of mind, and then the 5 sense offerings transformed into objects of bliss. Request to the Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharmapalas, for the sake of protecting the teachings, accomplishing the welfare of sentient beings, you've taken oaths and heart commitments, great and glorious agents, swift as the mind, with terrifying bodies and inexhaustible wrath, who subdue the vicious and destroy those on the dark side, who bestow results to the practice of yoga with inconceivable strength, power, and blessings. I request you to bestow all siddhis. In other words, all the levels of, I guess in Western mystical traditions, we call the ascended masters and the angels and angelettes and guardian spirits and personal guardians, all these kind of spiritual forces. We pay respect to them and request their assistance or their support in our practice. Om Vajra Mu, the mundane beings return to their own places. Visualizing myself as a Rukang consort, at my heart is a letter Hung radiating light, invoking my Guru and the aspect of Vajradhara, together with Chakra Samvara and his retinue of deities. The supreme objects of refuge are invoked from Akanista, the highest Buddha field, and appear in the space before me. The lights then dissolve back into my heart. In longer sadhanas, a lot more is said about that, and you can easily find longer sadhanas on the internet if you want to know in more detail what that's talking about, but here is simple. Just you send out lights and bring back the Guru, Vajradhara, and consort, and surrounded by all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and they dissolve into you. The field of merit gathered dissolves into me. I receive their blessings. Om Shunyita Jnana Vajrasava Atma Konya Ham. So this is the emptiness mantra again, and Jnana Vajra is the Vajra wisdom, Sobhawa, by self-nature, Atma Ko, beyond the emptiness of, which is the emptiness, which is the self of the self. All phenomena of the worlds and its beings dissolve into me, I dissolve into emptiness, bringing states of dissolution into the path of Samkova, bringing Dharmakaya into emptiness. So this is what we call taking Dharmakaya as a path. Everything dissolves into you, you and your heart, a heart into the hung up into clear light, and you basically just go into clear light emptiness. And if you do Mahamudra meditation, at that point you can just stay in Mahamudra meditation for as long as you like. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that. So we call that clear light Mahamudra. Generation stage clear light Mahamudra. Then from the state of emptiness where all appearances have gathered, from this my mind appears in the form of Sangogakaya, the 3 levels of subtle consciousness arise, coming into being from a nada standing upright in space, white with a shade of red. The nada's that little 3 curved fire you see on top of many Tibetan syllables. If you visit Tibetan temples or see Tibetan calligraphy, they put that on the little 3 little fire. And it represents the 3 dimensions of subtle consciousness. The white tinged with red is the male tinged with, the male aggression tinged with female passion. Male and female combined, you could say, or white tinged with red. Then bringing rebirth, instantly from the state of emptiness comes a Vajra ground tent canopy, web of arrows and fire. In the center of this are the 4 elements stacked one above the other. In other words, this is just the outer mandala, which is here called a protection wheel. Upon this is Mount Meru and a variegated lotus, in the center of which is variegated double Vajra. Upon this is an 8-petal variegated lotus, in the center of which are the vowels, which are womanly, and consonants, males. This isn't my translation. This translation was made by David Gonzalez, who lived in the West Coast for a long time. He passed away last year. He was very, very dedicated. He was also very lucky that someone sponsored him for his work, so he could just sit and translate. And he was living near a good quality Lama whom he could read over these things with. And he didn't travel or teach or anything like that. He just stayed there and basically did a retreat in the fire puja and then translated stuff associated with it. Then do another retreat and another fire puja and do stuff associated with it. And then he did 2 books on Chakra Samvara. One which is the translation of the sort of a shorter one often used for commentaries. And actually I have a copy of that in Tibetan, which I led a retreat in Asheville, North Carolina, maybe 10 or 12 years ago. And I used that as the basis. And then 5 years later, it came out, he published his translation of it. So I was very happy to see that, because that's one of my favorite Tibetan commentaries, written by one of the 7th Dalai Lama's main disciples. And then he also did, I think, Kyabje Trijung Doji Chung's oral commentary, which included perhaps the Body Mandala. I don't remember, because I don't do Body Mandala practice. I prefer short generation stage mandala practices and long completion stage Mahamudra practice. Tibetans like it the other way around, lots of generation stage chanting. And then the bit for the emptiness between things, Om Sabho Ashodo Sarva Dhamma Sabho Ashodo Hung, then it says, stay in emptiness as long as you can. They'll go, Om Sabho Ashodo Sarva Dhamma Sabho Ashodo Hung, Tompa Nido Kyar. Tompa Non Lair. Usually like that. And I think it's because they're in groups and the chanting is very beautiful and it's very, Taksaya Rinpoche, the Dalai Lama's older brother, said that growing up, who lived in Bloomington for many years and died there about 4 or 5 years ago, or however many years, and he wrote in one of his books that for them growing up in the monastery, those chanting periods were really their favorite meditation times, because you just get totally caught in the beauty of the flow of the chanting. And Tibetan chanting does have very much of a meditative side to it. When we go to Tibet, if you go into a temple and you have 10 or 12 people chanting, everyone wants to just sit down and meditate. It just makes you feel like if you sit and meditate, you'll just fly away to some wonderful, wonderful, and it just lifts you up. It's such a, at the one time, very simple and almost monotone, but at another time, just so rich in energy flow. Sort of like sitting by a river and listening to it flow. Upon this is Mount Meru, a variegated lotus, center of the double Vajra. Upon this, 8-petaled lotus fairy, in the center of which are the vowels, which are womanly, and the consonant males. I'm not sure what womanly means, but anyway. Oh, God, say it in the microphone.
Oh.
Which are womanly was a note that you gave at another retreat on Chakra.
Oh, yeah, well, I was
Samvara.
waxing poetic.
Yes, I think so. And I thought of
womanly
changing
vowels,
it to
like,
female,
oh,
but I thought this was more interesting.
Ah, E, oh, ooh. Very womanly. And consonants then should be manly. Ka, ka, nga, cha, 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 na. Manly, huh? I can see you ladies warming up already. These two completely transform into a moon mandala, white with a shade of red, and the mirror-like appearance of the vowels, consonants, and moon represent the exalted mirror-like wisdom and the exalted wisdom of equality. So these are known as the 5 enlightenments, or the 5 enlightenment unfoldments. So it kind of represents the arousal of these 5 primordial wisdoms in a kind of a metaphoric or symbolic way. So those 2 of the 5. Myself, the nada, standing in space, see below me the moon, white with a shade of red, the nature of red and white. Bodhicittas of male and female Buddhas are manly and womanly Buddhas in union, and with the strong intention to fulfill the welfare of all living beings, I enter the center of the moon. Gradually, the letter Hung emerges white with a shade of red, which represented the exalted wisdom of discrimination. From the Hum, light rays radiate, accomplish the 2 purposes, collect back, dissolve into the nada. The letter Hum becomes a nature of spontaneous joy, which represents the exalted wisdom of accomplishing activities. Om Ahum, Om Sarvabhina Yogini, Kaya, Vak, Chitta, Vajra, Sobo, Atma, Ko, Hum. Now the Sanskrit Atma Ko has a nya in it, and Tibetans usually pronounce the ya, nya, but the nya is actually just supposed to be make an empty sound or a pause, or Atma Ko, Hum, like that. But he doesn't, there's nothing in English to indicate we have no participle in English that you can put in, which means make a long pause here. In our alphabet, we don't have a syllable for that. It's like if you want to tell a good joke, the punchline is very important. You can't just like you have to go like da-da-da-da-da, da-da, da-da-da-da-da, da-da, da-da-da. Louder. The pauses are very important in communication, aren't they? And those words, kaya, vak, chitta. Kaya meaning body, vak, speech, chitta, mind. So the body, speech, and mind are of the yogini, completely purified, Sarvajra, Sabhoya, Sarvadhamma, Vajra, Shodohom. Following section can be abbreviated. The moon, vowels, consonants, home, completely transformed, supporting and supported mandala rise at once, representing the exalted wisdom of Dharma Dhatu. So in that way, the 5 wisdoms are aroused, so that's what is referred to as the 5 enlightenments in the generation stage of Chakra Samvara. The celestial mansion is constructed like a square house with 4 doorways, ornaments, archways, complete with all characteristics. In the center is a lotus of various colors and a seat, sun seat. Upon this lotus eye arises a Bhagavan Haruka with a dark blue body. So like those of mandalas over there, often they're shown in that circular form with a square house inside it, So that's the meaning, although here they use arrows. My right leg is outstretched and press the head of black Bhairava. My left leg presses the breast of red Kalarati. So it represents dancing upon all of the kind of dancing upon or dancing with all of the spiritual, worldly spiritual forces, bringing all worldly spiritual forces into harmony or into step with the Enlightenment dance. The male element is chakras and Vajra, holds a Vajra and bell, hair tied up on the crown of his head, marked with a variegated Vajra, forehead adorned with a crown of 5 skulls, and so on. Long necklace of 50 human heads strung together with human intestines. So the 50 human heads represent the 51, they're supposed to represent, usually they say 51 human heads in the Vasubandhu system, and in Asanga 49. So they compromise between Asanga and his brother, the Abhidharma, representing our 51 secondary minds or mental functions like anger and passion and love and compassion. All these so-called conceptual mind states or ordinary human processing states characterized by duality. All of those have been cut off and strung on the intestine or guts or the essence of the wisdom of non-duality. The meaning is something like that. And in male-female tantra, when they're dry heads, it indicates female tantra in which tumo or inner fire is stressed. And so the inner fire, the heat of the wisdom of the female element turns the skull into a dry skull. Male tantras, they're always just freshly severed and dripping with blood to represent sort of the male aggression quality. So again, that all of our angers, our love, and compassion are now all totally transformed. And of those 51 or 49, 50, 51 in the different systems, one is sleep. For instance, that's considered a secondary mental state that we slip into, almost like slipping into anger or slipping into a feeling of love or kindness or something like that. Sometimes we slip into sleep. Sleep is one of those 4 that's sometimes positive and sometimes negative. Like last night, I made the mistake before going to sleep of eating the chocolate cake that Paula sent. And so my sleep was very caffeine driven. It was sometimes positive, sometimes a little bit, what would you call, a little bit like Popeye on steroids, on too much spinach. The female element is Vajravati Varaha, and so he's yellow, red-colored body, 1 face, 2 hands, 3 eyes. And the 3 eyes, of course, are seeing the male eye and the female eye, so seeing with method, seeing with wisdom, and then seeing clairvoyantly, seeing the world of enlightenment beyond duality. And right hand holds a curved knife. Well, the curved knife always represents the ability to cut through to emptiness. It's a method of cutting through to emptiness. And the left, a skull cup filled with the blood of the 4 Maras. So that's what's in this painting here, in Vajrayogini by the great Mongolian artist Shoyinma. And that represents the white of the skull cup represents emptiness, and the red inside the skull cup represents the great bliss. So in all the female tantras, these 2 implements, the triku and the tupa, are very, very common. And actually many Tibetan practitioners carry those with them when they go traveling. They'll have a little human skull cup. Often, if you're a notable person like me, you'll have it lined with pure silver. Now, sometimes Dalai Lamas, for instance, is lined with gold. He's more notable. And so the high lamas, the high tulkus, it is very common, say, if you're a wealthy patron and you're visiting a lama, and you may offer something like that to him. But in Tibetan medicine, gold is considered a very valuable substance for health, as is copper. I remember the Dalai Lama's doctor, for whom I occasionally would translate for friends visiting who needed to see him, was very irritated when Western pennies stopped being made of pure copper. Because he would ask, his friends coming from the West, bring me like a big box of pennies, because American issue pennies were 100% pure copper. And he didn't trust anything made in India, because the Indians dilute or pollute everything by mixing in something. Then he'd have he'd have a little army of pharmacologists out there with a file on the pennies, getting little copper dust off of them for some of his concoctions. And he could just cure anything with anything. Now, Mongolians believe that with silver it purifies. So often when they drink water, they'll have a silver coin, 100% silver. They'll drop in the water for a few minutes and let it sit for a few minutes, and then they'll drink the water. And they think it performs some kind of magic on the water. Problem with minerals, using minerals and metals, is they can also have the opposite effect. Like, for instance, the great insight teacher, one of the three great insight teachers up at Barre, Massachusetts, was taking a Chinese silver supplement tincture pill of some kind or other that someone put him on. And then he started going into seizures. I mean, he was taking these, I don't know, once a day, once a week, however often. And 10 years later, he started having sort of epileptic seizures, but with no signs of epilepsy. And so nobody could figure out, the American government with their health system spent, tens of thousands of dollars trying to figure out what this was. And then one day when he was in visiting the doctor saw him take a pill, and he said, what are you taking? And he told him, he says, that must be it. The other hundreds of thousands of dollars we've spent trying to figure out what you had came down to you taking a silver that basically is short-circuiting your nervous system. So the signals just go bzz, 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 like electricity that's short-circuited, and you fall on the floor in spasms. So they took him off of that, and within a couple of weeks, detoxifying, he was cured. So we've got Chakrasambhara with the consort, and each of the four directions dancing dakini. So these 5 dakinis represent the 5 wisdoms. And Chakrasambhara, the male element, basically represents the 5 skandhas. On the eastern direction of the 8 petals of the lotus, black dakini and so forth, they all have one face, 4 hands. Their 2 hands hold a curved knife and damaru. The 2 left hold a skull cup and a katvanga, naked with loosely hanging hair adorned with the 5 mudras. They wear a crown of 5 human skulls and a long necklace of 50 human skulls. Stand with their right legs. Then we bless the 4 chakras, visualizing oneself as the male and female in union, creating a swastika out of their bodies, with energy exchange between the 4 chakras of the male and female, balancing male and female energies. At the navel, so the bits in brackets are things that I said in my, okay. So you don't chant the bits which are in brackets. Right. At the male's navel and heart, and the female's throat and forehead are moon cushions of the mother's essence and their essence mantras. At the mother's navel and heart, and the father's throat and cushions are cushions with the father's essence and their essence mantras. The mantras are red in color, and light rays radiate black, back and forth, touching and embracing. So when it puts that mantra up there, you can cross that out. Om Vajravaraya Hom Hom. So you can cross that out. The 2 mantras are given later, so you know exactly what they are. So if you put it there, it just makes confusion. Blessing the secret places from the secret place of the Father. meaning the genitalia. So now that I said it, the secret is no secret anymore. From a white hung, there arises a white five-pronged vajra. From a red ba, there arises a red jewel marked with a letter ba. From the secret place of the female, and from an ah, there arises a red three-petaled lotus, and from a white da, there arises a white stamen, signifying the white bodhicitta, marked with a yellow da. Oma ah hung, by entering into embrace, I generate the four joys which are drawn out in stages. In other words, a male and female, the places of union are transformed in that way. And the lotus and the stamen are actually inside the passage of the female. So it's like, so when the male enters into union, the stamen of the lotus is standing like this. And as the male enters the female, the stamen actually goes up the urethra, of the male. So in that way, it's kind of an old form of birth control. So that way, it blocks the passage, so you can do the control of the elements. That's what the white stamen does, signifying white bodhicitta marked with a yellow da. By entering the embrace, I generate so you can say by entering the embrace, or just they enter embrace, or they embrace. It means enter sexual union. Generate four joys which are drawn out in stages. Inseparability of great bliss and emptiness is actually 37 aspects of emptiness, and da-da-da. Then evoking the wisdom beings, Pem, light radiates forth from the syllable hung. And we recite, and then we expel any negative energies. Om Aragam Pratyas, Om Za Hum Bam Ho. Become inseparable, Yogasona, bestowing empowerment, Aragam Pratyas, and so on. Om Sarvatiga Samya Shriya Hung, secret, and offering the male and female enter into union, generate the four joys of the simultaneously born bliss and emptiness, delighted by the offering of suchness. In other words, they enter into union, and then you do the practice of the heat rising from both inside their bodies and causing the descent of the white through both. So it goes from the crown to the throat, to the heart, to the navel, to the secret place. And then because of the da and the ba blocking, it cannot leave and is reversed and brought back up, giving rise to the four ascending joys. So these four ascending joys, on the basis of those four ascending joys, we will do Mahamudra. So the difference between ordinary Mahamudra and Tantric Mahamudra is done on the basis of a mind which has been utterly intoxicated with the four blisses or the four great joys. Then the meditation session. So it's at that point you stop and you can do vase breathing and some other tantric practice. And then when the bliss is stabilized, the tantric mind is stabilized, do Mahamudra meditation for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, however long you like doing it. Then you do the mantra. Then usually the commentary says when you get a little bit when you've had enough, you get a little bit drowsy. Like sometimes when you sit in meditation, I don't know if it happens to you guys, but some people get a little bit drowsy after a while. So or if there's other concerns, like, you've got a time limit, you have to get, up and watch from your meditation and watch the hockey game or something like that. Or the baby's crying. But if you have a set period, you're going to do your meditation session for, say, 45 minutes, then you time each section to be the kind of length which is managed. It's sort of like budgeting or something like that. So you'd start with Mahamudra, and then you do Mahamudra hair. And then at the end of the session, you would once again do Mahamudra. At the heart of myself is a deity, and a sun disk is a letter Hung, surrounded by the mantra rosary, arranged counterclockwise, and so on. Lights go out. Then the essence and near essence. often translated as the heart mantra and the near heart mantra, but it just means the one next to that. One stands inside and one's outside, standing upright like this in a circle on the discs, sun and moon discs. So then if you do it in retreat, usually you do 10,000 of the heart mantra and 100,000 of the near heart mantra for each of the two. And so Chakra done as a retreat, they call it the Lerung, the qualifying retreat, to do various kind of other tantric activities associated with the tantra. Fire pujas, self-initiations, death rituals for people, and wealth rituals for yourself and others and stuff like that. To get the power of the practice, to get the energy or competence in the practice, or the blessing in the practice, or whatever one wants to call it. That retreat over a period of 3 or 4 weeks or 6 weeks, 3 months, people will just, depending on how much they like retreat and what is their private schedule, will choose a length of time. And do those 2 mantras. And then one does just 10,000 of each of the 4 Dakini mantras. Then dissolve the mandala, rest in clear light and bliss combined as follows. Lights radiate from the hung of my heart. The supporting mana dissolves into the retinue dissolves into the male and female. They dissolve into the hung. This dissolves from the bottom up into clear light. So at the end of the practice, one goes back to the Mahamudra practice. Then after that, if one likes, one does these other things, like the Vajrasattva practice, etc. So that's a kind of very short form or simple form of the sadhana. And you can get longer forms on the internet. Now, Tibetans do like the idea, Tibetan Lamas like the idea of whatever sadhana you use, it's good to get a Lama who has received the oral transmission of that Tantra. Tibetans are very big on oral transmissions, lung, which, I don't know, some Westerners like them a lot, and some think they're a little bit antiquated. So, someone who's heard that being read or chanted, you go to someone who's heard it being read or chanted, and you say, please give me the lung, and they sit up and chant it for you. I enjoyed reading one of Gelek Rinpoche, the Lama in Ann Arbor, who passed away a few weeks ago, reading one of his transcripts. He said, I kept trying to get the oral transmission for this one particular practice text. And so then I went to see, he mentions the name of the Rinpoche. And he said, yeah, when you come, I'll give it to you. And then I went, and he wasn't feeling so well. And he read a few pages, and then he started really like wobbling, because he wasn't very old and wasn't feeling well. So Rinpoche said, we should maybe continue another day. And the Lama said, yeah. So that was it. He didn't get it. And the next time he went to my guru, Dhammalobcha Rinpoche, who was his Yungzin from childhood, and asked him to give the transmission. And Rinpoche said, well, I'm a little sleepy today, but if I give it to you, I'll have to stretch out on my couch. And he got about halfway through and fell asleep. And Gelek would tell these kind of stories with this kind of dry sense of humor. He says, so I had real trouble getting this oral transmission. Finally, I got it from blah-da-da. But some of these texts that you ask oral transmissions for, they can be like 2,000 or 3,000 pages. And the Lama basically just sits there and, it's going and occasionally he'll stop or say something. And the real greats at it, of course, like Dilgo Khyentse was famous for doing it. And he could read it at a breakneck speed, but put a kind of a sense of total understanding in it. Sort of like, a Shakespearean actor reading Shakespeare lines with sort of complete expression of the meaning emotionally and texture of voice and all of that. So I got a few of those from him, but one time he was a little bit too long for his time schedule and he had to take off. So he brought out another Lama and they just broke the book in two. And then there's two of them reading simultaneously. And so after that, any hope of following either, So anyway, after the lunch break, we'll look a little bit at the completion stage tantric practices for maybe half an hour or an hour, and then we'll have a half hour to wrap up. So this is a very simple sadhana, and people who like to practice it, or you can just take the 4 mantras and do them while you walk around, or you can just cut out bits you don't like. You don't have to read things in sadhanas, although often these days Lamas will say you have to chant the whole sadhana every day, but in India these were actually just guidelines to visualization and reminders as sort of teaching, cliff notes for teaching tools. And later, as monasteries became bigger places and people were practicing together, they became more sort of liturgical, you could say, and more wordy. So you can just memorize, understand the half dozen structures or a dozen main key points of the practice and do that as visualization. Like I sit here and I become chakra samvara, and then the mandala arises in the 5 stages representing the unfoldment of the 5 wisdoms. And then consecrate the secret places and enter into union and bring the 4 drops down, bring the drop down through the 4 chakras, inducing the 4 joys and bringing back up. You can sort of hop through all of that just visually without doing the chanting if you don't like doing chanting. And then just do the mantras and do the Mahamudra and the Tumo practice connected with it. But if you like the chanting, and some people do, then you can do it as a textual liturgy. Yeah.
Just for convenience sake, I wanted to record the 4 mantras. If you can chant them.
You want to have my beautiful mispronunciation of Sanskrit on record?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And we can do some just together as a group. So when we come over to the mantras, they are on page 78. Page 8. Shri Vajrahe Ru Kaum Badagini Jala Samvaran Soha. Shri Vajrahe Ru Kaum Badagini Jala Samvaran Soha. Om Shri Vajrahe Ru Kam Hum Pa Dakini Jala Samvaran Soha. Now Tibetans don't say hum, they say hong. Om Shri Vajrahe Ru Kam Hum Padagini Jala Samvaran Soha. Let me hear you. Om Shri Vajrahe Ru Kam Hum Padagini Jala Samvaran Soha. Om Shri Vajrahe Ru Kam Hum Padagini Jala Samvaran Soha. Om Shri Vajrahe Ru Kam Hum Padagini Jala Samvaran Soha. Om Shri Vajrahe Ru Kam Hum Padagini Jala Samvaran. So when you do the 100,000, you do them The first few you do at that kind of slow rate, like Om Shri Vasahi Ru Ru Kaum Ba Dagini Jala Sambara and so on. After 7 or 21, then you go quietly Om Shri Vasahi Ru Ru Kaum Ba Om Shri Vasahi Ru Ru Kaum, like that. If it's done as a daily practice, you can do 3, 7, 21, 108, and they always in the text put Jisipa, whatever you like. Jisipa literally means whatever is possible or whatever is convenient, something like that, based on your time. But if it's in a retreat for the lay rung, you do 100,000. And from the Om Hri Ha Ha Hum Hum Pa, the Nair mantra, you do 10,000. Om Hri Ha Hum Ba 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 Om Hri Ha Om Hri Ha Hum Ba. Then the heart mantra or essence mantra, Nyinga, of the female. Baza barotsaniya hum hum peso. Baza barotsaniya hum hum peso. Baza barotsaniya hum hum peso. Baza barotsaniya hum hum pe. Baza barotsaniya hum hum peso. Ha. Let's hear you. Baza barotsaniya hum hum peso. Baza barotsaniya hum hum peso. Baza barotsaniya hum hum pe. And then you do very fast. Baza barotsaniya hum peso. Sort of like that. And then the Nair essence mantra, Om Sarva Buddha Dikiniya Vasavaniya Vasvarosniya Hum Besoa. Om Sarva Buddha Dikiniya Vasavaniya Vasvarosniya Hum Hum Beso. Om Sarva Buddha Dikiniya Vasavaniya Vasvarosniya Hum Hum Beso. Ha Om Vasava. Om Sarva Buddha Dikiniya Vasavaniya Vasvarosniya Hum Hum Beso. Om Sarva Buddha Dikiniya Vasvarosniya Hum Hum Beso. And then you do it quickly and quietly. Om Sarva Buddha Dikiniya Vasavaniya. And people who find this, and then you do the 5 of the dakinis. Om Dakiniya Hum Hum Pe. Om Dakiniya Hum Hum Pe. Om Dakiniya Hum Hum Pe. Om Dakiniya Hum Pe. Om Lame Hum Hum Pe. Om Lame Hum Hum Pe. Om Lame Hum Hum. Om Lame Hum Hum Pe. Om Lame Hum Hum Pe. On Kendroya Hum Hum Ba. 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 On Rupaniya Hum Hum Ba. On Rupaniya Hum Hum Ba. On Rupaniya Hum Hum Ba. So those are the 8 mantras associated with the practice. And David always transliterates them in the way that Tibetans mispronounce the Sanskrit. So you'll have that choice when you transliterate these kind of mantra practices, whether to go to modern Sanskrit pronunciation, which Sanskritist thinks is the correct way to pronounce them, or use the way Tibetans do them, which some people think is kind of a mixture, blending in some Tibetan character rules with what might be the way it was pronounced 1,000 years ago. Problem is with language, we don't know exactly how anything was pronounced before we could record it. So we're just relying, like Knight should be pronounced Knigat. And anyone who's a traditional will say Knigat. Knigat, arise, do your duty for the king. So we say night, so then we should, if we're transliterating it into a foreign language, we should put Nite, right, or something like that. But so there's that sort of question with Sanskrit, is the way people pronounce it today. In India, the Indian Sanskrit is pronouncing it the way it was pronounced 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago? Or is that all totally transformed with the passage of centuries and millenniums? But you can easily find the Sanskrit forms of them. In other words, the way modern Sanskritists would pronounce, you can easily find on the web if you look and you want to do that sort of thing. Like, for instance, Tibetans have no letter V, so they can't say Vajra. They can't say Vagindra. That sound Va is very, very hard for a Tibetan to say. So they transliterate it with a Wa, Wagindra. And they say, that's very, very good. And they have no letter F. And many other sounds that you may find in other languages. It's like in English, we've got no way to transliterate the African bush. There's no letter we can put down which someone would look at it and know you go, this is a very nice day. This is a very day. What would you say? Very day. Could you spell that, please? If we put like click, people would say that's a very click day, but it doesn't quite catch it.